Manchester United has confirmed that one of Britain's richest men, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, is to buy a 25% stake in the football club.
Everybody likes a story about a hero.
He's a great businessman as well, one of the best.
He's Britain's richest man. INEOS have huge revenues.
Somebody who came to save it all.
A long-term plan for Manchester United.
This for Ratcliffe is about legacy.
Someone who always belonged here.
He grew up being a Manchester United supporter.
He's emotionally invested.
The fans see that he cares.
A hero who could finally defeat the villains and restore the empire.
Manchester United is not where it's expected to be.
INEOS Group will be in charge of footballing operations.
Manchester United have just gone and stolen Omar Berrada from City.
Please, will you welcome the Director of Football, Jason Wilcox.
Football people, proper structure, time to stop the madness.
And he's doing everything exactly properly.
But all of that was just a cruel illusion, because this is not one of those stories.
How's it going at Manchester United?
Well, it depends how much you read the press, really, doesn't it, how well things are going. We try to ignore the press.
Manchester United Football Club in the mud again.
Tickets.
He says, I don't think it makes sense for a Manchester United ticket to cost less than a ticket to see Fulham.
66 quid, mate! 66 quid, mate! What are you doing, mate? We're Northerners, come on, mate! Sort it out!
Worse than the Glazers,
we
mate.
take triple!
Worse than the Glazers,
we
yeah.
take funds, mate!
How can you ask Man United fans to pay 66 quid more money for what is coming on the football field?
Redundancies.
It's just a shame that someone kind of comes in, pretends to be a man of the people, sacks everyone left, right and centre in the job that has jobs there.
You're not allowed soup or a banana at Carrington because we need to save money.
At the moment, Manchester United can't afford to give people free lunches because they have to go to the bank and borrow it.
And then you set fire to £14.5 million like that.
Baffling decisions.
When you're spending £4.1 million to hire and fire a single executive, a £14.5 million compensation bill because of your decision to back and then sack Erik ten Hag, £21 million to replace him with another manager.
He needs to demonstrate that he's a great coach over 3 years. We have to be patient.
Manchester United have sacked Ruben Amorim.
What? Oh my God.
It was a joke. Absolute joke.
It's a total mess at Old Trafford.
Most of the early optimism has largely now evaporated.
A new record for United's debt.
We've inherited a situation which we've inherited.
It's not our debt, it's the Glazers' debt. The debt that they've created. Manchester United were debt-free before they came in, so why do the fans now all of a sudden have to pay for it?
But how did all of this become possible in the span of just 2 years?
We can't put our head in the sand. We have to deal with the problem.
And Manchester United to close its staff canteen and instead offer employees a free piece of fruit as part of more cost-cutting measures at the club.
But the alternative isn't very tenable, is it? Which is the club goes bust at Christmas.
Why is there only one way out of this mess? And why, if no one stops it now, it could lead the club into an even bigger catastrophe?
I think it is the greatest football club in the world, and it needs a stadium of that stature, I think.
I think Man United are finished.
I'm Ruslan, and in this video we are going to expose a staggering web of lies and betrayal. So buckle up! 2 years had passed since the shift of power at Man United. Back in December 23, the frustration within the community had reached its absolute limit. And looking back, there is no better moment for a change. The best part was that the club wasn't bought by some oil-rich state looking for sports washing. No, the guy who won the battle was one of us. A local lad, someone who knows the history, the traditions, and has suffered through the losses just like the fans. Plus, Jim Ratcliffe and the INEOS group already had experience running sports teams, including football clubs. But let's be real, while Lausanne and Nice offered some lessons, they were nowhere near the scale of the challenge waiting in Manchester. Still, the trust in him at that moment was undeniable. The Glazer family remains the majority owner, but they have stepped into the shadows, handing the controls over to Sir Jim. So what did 20 years of their ownership actually leave behind? I'll keep this short because I have a full, detailed breakdown of their takeover scheme already on the channel. Definitely check that out when you finish this video. Here's the story. In the early 2000s, Malcolm Glazer, an American real estate tycoon who owns an NFL team, saw huge potential in English football. With backing from JP Morgan, he executed a takeover of Man United using a method called a leveraged buyout. Let me explain that simply. He didn't pay with his own money. He borrowed £600 million and used the club itself as the collateral. Essentially, United was bought with its own future money. He placed a noose of debt around the club's neck, something that had never happened in its history. Malcolm put his sons in charge and never even bothered to visit Old Trafford. The club began a slow shift from a football institution to a corporate business. It became a money-making machine. While the team was still winning on the pitch, the management only cared about revenue and paying off that loan. And for a while, Sir Alex Ferguson held it all together. His success hid the problems. But once he left, influence shifted to a man like Ed Woodward, an accountant with no football background who was close to the Glazers. That's when things really fell apart. Woodward turned United into a giant advertisement. Marketing came first, football came second. The club was printing money, but it wasn't for transfers or the stadium, it was to service the Glazers' massive debt. The numbers are staggering. That initial £600 million debt turned into over £800 million just in interest payments. The Glazers used the club as their personal piggy bank, taking out nearly £180 million in dividends for themselves. And finally, they cashed in again, selling 25% of the club to Ratcliffe for $1 billion. So that is the 20-year timeline condensed into just a couple of minutes. Again, for the complete breakdown, check the link right here. You know, every time I dive deep into this story, when you actually line up the facts and connect the dots, it still blows my mind. I mean, I just don't understand how the regulators let this slide. Who signed off on a takeover like that? Why didn't they update the rules to stop these kind of deals right when the Premier League was taken off and big capitals started circling English clubs? Let's call it what it is, a robbery in front of the entire world. It was bold, it was shameless, and the consequences are going to last for decades. But anyway, the guys at INEOS were ready to flip the scripts and they wasted no time. And here is the most interesting part, something we'll definitely come back to later. Despite remaining the majority owners, the Glazers handed Ratcliffe full control over all football operations. He doesn't even have to run his decisions by them, not even for hiring or firing the most important figures in the club. And you know what? Ratcliffe's 2 years in charge feel like a speedrun of the Glazers' timeline. First, Sir Jim wanted to prove this was a serious project where power would be handed to actual football professionals. This was a massive shift from the previous approach. Back in January, even before his purchase of the club stake was officially closed, he poached Omar Birada from Man City. Birada is a highly respected executive who climbed the ladder at City. He started by building their commercial machine, partnerships and revenue, and eventually became the chief operating officer for the entire City football group. He comes from a place where decisions are part of the system, not just random guess. Definitely keep that in mind, because it's going to be very important a bit later in the story. So Birada became the man responsible for United's new football project, and his first step was building a department actually run by pros. To do that, Omar brought in his own guys. One of them was Jason Wilcox, someone he'd worked alongside for a decade. Wilcox used to be the academy director at City, where his main job was getting young talent ready for the first team. And given that under his watch the academy produced Phil Foden and Cole Palmer, I think it's fair to say the guy knows what he's doing. But at United his role changed. First he came in as a technical director, but it wasn't long before he got a serious promotion. So you see the plan. INEOS immediately started fixing the actual structure of the club. These were smart, long-term moves that really boosted confidence in the project. But here's the thing, when you have a club this big, with goals this high and that much money on the line, you are going to get internal politics. You can't avoid clashes of interest. And this is where Dave Brailsford enters the story. Think of him as the Grey Cardinal of INEOS, the guy supervising their entire sports portfolio. If Ratcliffe is the wallet and the power, Brailsford is the brain. He's a legend in British cycling who basically revolutionized the sport worldwide. He's obsessed with the philosophy of marginal gains, which we'll talk about in a minute. But at the start, they were dealing with problems way bigger than small margins. While they were building this new team, Brailsford felt that Berrada's circle was getting too much control. So he convinced Ratcliffe that they needed to dilute that power. They needed a competent outsider, someone who wasn't connected to Berrada at all. And honestly, back then it looked like a genius move. They went for Dan Ashworth, easily one of the best sporting directors in the Prem over the last few years. He is the guy who built that rock-solid Brighton team and then took his blueprints to Newcastle. Think of Ashworth as Mr. System, effective but cold, methodical and calculating. He speaks in numbers, not emotions. He is the guy who studies 5 different scenarios before making a single decision. That is the exact opposite of Wilcox, who is charismatic, one of the guys type who can vibe with anyone, whether it's a kitman or an owner. It's no wonder Wilcox quickly became the main man in the big boss's ear, literally sitting next to him in the box during games. Anyway, Ashworth enters the chat, slotting into the hierarchy right between Berrada and Wilcox, becoming Wilcox's direct boss. So yeah, the ticking time bomb was officially planted. The United brass was so fixated on Ashworth that they entered a full-scale war with Newcastle. The Magpies had no intention of letting their employee go to a rival, especially knowing he would likely carry all his systemic trade secrets with him to United. Ratcliffe fought for this guy for nearly 6 months, eventually buying him out from Newcastle for £3 million. Ultimately, Ashworth only joined United after the season concluded. But hey, let me finally stop talking about suits and say something about the actual football.
I'm sure we have a really good chance to take the cup back to Old Trafford. I want to thank you. We felt a really strong bound during the season.
INEOS walked into the club right in the middle of Erik ten Hag's second season. It was supposed to be the season that cemented the success of the first, but instead it turned into a total catastrophe. We saw a historic record for losses and an embarrassing exit from the Champions League group stage. Sure, there were plenty of reasons: an injury crisis, questionable decisions by Ten Hag to ditch his pragmatic tactics, and a lot more. By December, just as the power transfer was happening, United was stuck down in 8th place and out of Europe. But the new bosses decided not to swing the axe immediately. As we know, they were too busy building their corporate structure. So Ten Hag's future was put on hold until the end of the season. Spoiler alert, he never moved from that 8th place spot, delivering United's worst finish in Premier League history. But somehow, for a second year running, Erik still won a trophy.
It wasn't an easy season. Thank you. You are the best supporters in the world. Thank you.
At the end of this nightmare season, Dan Ashworth finally joins the club right at the crucial moment. The board had to decide what to do with Ten Hag. Here's the crazy part: during the second half of the season, the bosses were openly talking to other candidates like Pochettino, McKenna and Tuchel. When they couldn't agree with any of them, they went back to Ten Hag and admitted to his face that they had been looking for a replacement. To show trust and convince the fans that everyone was holding hands and singing Kumbaya heading into the new season, they triggered a 1-year extension on Erik's contract. Parallel to this, probably at the exact moment Ten Hag's payout clause got a nice bump in that new deal, a massive optimization campaign kicked off. And this is where things get weird. For the first time, even the biggest INEOS fans and the hardest Glazers haters started scratching their heads. On paper, a massive cost-cutting program sounds logical. Despite breaking revenue records every year, United had posted a loss for 5 years straight. The debt, thanks to the Glazers and unpaid transfer fees, was over £1 billion. So yeah, it was time to cut costs. But the real question was, who was going to pay the price? The first step was an overhaul of the ticket system, and it slammed the people who could afford it the least. They hiked season ticket prices by 5% for the third straight year. But the real kicker, they scrapped discounts for kids and seniors. A child's ticket jumped from £25 to a full adult price of £66. Formally, according to the club, these changes affected only 3% of tickets. But it's not about the percentage, it is proof that the paradigm has finally completely shifted. Man United is stopping being a club for families who have been going for generations, passing the passion down from father to son. In the eyes of INEOS, it doesn't matter if Old Trafford is full of die-hard fans or tourists looking for a selfie. They don't want a supporter, they want a customer. Another blow to tradition came when the club withdrew from several charitable programs. This included cutting payments to the Manchester United Veterans Fund, amounts that were absolutely laughable for a club of this size. Forget the payments, Ratcliffe even cancelled the traditional Christmas lunch for the veterans. You are probably asking yourself, how could a member of the community, someone who knows the situation from the inside, agree to this? He knows what the fans have suffered over the past 20 years, forced to pay the interest on the Glazers' loan out of their own pockets after their club was stolen from them. And now you wanna hurt them even more and dig even deeper into their pockets? But hold on, it gets even worse. Dave Brailsford steps back in to lead a massive layoff program. And again, the fans try to be logical. They thought, okay, maybe this makes sense. The old regime was wasteful, the payroll is bloated, let the new pros clean up the mess. Makes sense, right? Well, guess who actually got fired? It wasn't the useless executives with massive salaries. It was the ordinary workers. The staff at Carrington, the groundskeepers, the ticket sellers, even the ladies serving food in the canteen. Do you remember Brailsford's marginal gains? That whole philosophy from cycling, where he made riders carry their own mattresses to hotels and gave lessons on how to wash their hands so they wouldn't catch a cold. He believed success was in the tiny details, and he brought that obsession to Old Trafford. For the first few months, Dave basically moved into Carrington. He was walking the halls with a notepad, auditing everything, deciding who was useful and who was just dead weight. He treated the football club exactly like a racing bike. You have to scrape off every extra gram to make it go faster. But here is the grim reality. In cycling, dead weight is metal. In Manchester, it was actual human beings. Ordinary working class people. The plan was to fire them to stop the 5-year streak of financial losses and get the books back to zero.
Woo! That's a brilliant plan, is it?
But here's what I don't get, and what the bosses never explained. How does firing regular staff and taking away their free bus rides, their free lunches and their Christmas party aligns with 2 transfer campaigns costing £500 million? How does it fit with the fortune spent on paying off fired superstars? Or with the fact that in this very first year under INEOS, the club's costs hit an all-time record in United's entire history? I am sure the reason expenses exploded like that is because of the massive golden parachutes they had to pay the lady from the canteen. And the groundskeepers, honestly, thank God the club didn't go bankrupt paying out those huge settlements to the ticket office staff. It was a close call. But anyway, let's stop worrying about their financials and get back to our timeline. So here we are, in the summer after that nightmare season. Despite flirting with other coaches, the board decided to stick with Ten Hag, and INEOS launched their first major transfer spree to back him. This is also the first transfer window for Ashford, who is still trying to settle into the club and a foreign system where he is clearly not welcome. To be fair, his role in this campaign was largely formal. He only took office in July, when the shortlist had already been drawn up by Wilcox, leaving them to merely handle the negotiations. Nevertheless, United managed to pull off a major campaign, signing several young players who clearly had the potential to become future top stars. But then a chain of events unfolded that basically nuked any chance of planning or predicting anything at this club. 3.5 months. That's all it took for the bosses to U-turn on their summer decision and sign Ten Hag's death warrant. The Dutchman certainly helped them out by delivering the worst start to a season in United's history. On top of that, the summer signings, bought specifically for his system in one of the most expensive windows ever, were flopping hard. So, right in the middle of the season, Man United found themselves without a manager, sitting in 14th place and trailing the Champions League zone by 7 points. And yes, The same geniuses who lectured the fans about optimizing costs and cancelled the staff Christmas party suddenly found their checkbooks. They had to pay out a massive severance package to Ten Hag, a payout they had voluntarily increased just 3 months earlier. The decision to fire him was actually made 3 weeks before the official announcement, during a secret meeting of United's entire leadership team at the INEOS office in Knightsbridge. That meeting lasted 7 hours, and what happened there was absolute quintessence of the chaos that has plagued this club for so many years. So, all 6 people in that secret meeting quickly agreed on step 1. Ten Hag was done. Easy. But then came step 2, which turned into a 7-hour debate between 2 opposing camps. The Berardi group placed their shortlist on the table. Their clear preference was Ruben Amorim, a rising star in the coaching world with charisma and a distinct playing style and philosophy. The problem, however, was that Amorim's philosophy did not fit United's current squad at all. Furthermore, he had already established a reputation as a stubborn dogmatist, someone with no desire to adapt to circumstances if it means sacrificing his principles. However, Wilcox and Berardi presented this as an asset rather than a liability. Their argument was simple. If we are truly undertaking the most massive rebuild since Fergie left, who better to lead the team than a dogmatic coach? It was the only way for United to finally find a philosophy and stick to a path. After all, for 2.5 years under Ten Hag, the team had been criticized precisely for lacking a clear style. Yes, previous managers at Old Trafford had similar issues, but the Dutchman seemed to drag the situation to the edge, lowering the bar of identity to its lowest point in a decade. In opposition to this rhetoric stood Ashworth. In his 3 months at the club, he had conducted an audit and concluded that Manchester has been changing too radically in recent years. What the club needed now was a period of calm to sort out its existing resources. Dan proposed finding a coach who fits the current squad as closely as possible to stabilize the situation and get the club back on track without writing off millions on past investments. He had several candidates from the Premier League in mind, but he hesitated on a final choice, suggesting a multi-stage review, analysis and detailed study of each option to ensure they hit the target. Plus, Ashworth reminded Wilcox of an inconvenient fact. Jason himself had rejected Amorim's candidacy just a few months earlier, back in the summer when they were first looking for Ten Hag's replacement. So, seriously, what changed? Why the sudden flip-flop from a technical director? 3 months ago, his analysis said Amorim was wrong for United. Now, suddenly, he's the chosen one? First off, there was a huge risk that City would snatch Amorim the following summer. They just appointed a new sporting director, Hugo Viana, who had worked closely with Ruben at Sporting and remained a close friend. Plus, relying on his old intel from City, Berardi was convinced that Pep was leaving at the end of the season. So, this felt like the last chance to hijack Ruben. However, it seems Omar's sources failed him badly, because just a few weeks after this meeting, Pep extended his contract. Second, Wilcox, who had studied Ratcliffe closely, understood that the boss needed a ready-made solution by the end of this meeting. Sir Jim was already fed up with the manager search after the summer failures. Since Tuchel had gone to England and Poch went to the States, the market was empty. That left the door wide open for Amorim. And by the way, Ratcliffe was not happy that Mr. Boring Ashworth failed to offer a concrete plan again. Their relationship was doomed from the start, and Dan's countdown had already begun. That secret meeting wasn't just about firing Ten Hag, it sealed Ashworth's fate too, even though he'd hang on for a couple more months. Berardi's crew had won the war. The negotiations with Sporting dragged on, and initially Amorim flat out refused to move mid-season. It was a smart, calculated decision. Implementing his complex, dogmatic back-three system required at least a full pre-season, not to mention a massive transfer campaign to fill specific positions. Ruben knew that without those conditions he would become an easy target. Arriving in November right in the Premier League meat-grinder with the players who didn't get his tactics. If he didn't win immediately, the press, who were calling him the new Mourinho, would eat him alive. And the fans, sick of rebuilds, would turn on him just as fast. But let's be real, even with a pre-season and new players, players, nobody knew if it would work. Was his style even right for the Premier League? It was a big gamble. This league has broken even bigger geniuses than him. Ruben realized all of this and was fully aware of the risks. But Berrada and Wilcox had no choice. They had backed themselves into a corner and had to sweet-talk him and sign him right now, at any cost. To break Amorim's resistance, they promised him fundamental influence over all processes. They guaranteed him control and full carte blanche to rebuild the squad. Essentially, they sold Ruben a dream. Come now, settle in, acclimatize. If the results aren't there, don't worry, just survive for 6 months and in the summer we will build you a dynasty. And of course all of this was backed by Sir Jim's personal charm and a suitcase full of money that Berrada brought to Lisbon. They simply bought his agreement, burying him in promises that, as we know now, were worth no more than the paper his contract was printed on. We simply have to mention Ratcliffe's reaction. It seems Amorim just swept him off his feet with his aura, his charisma and that fire in his eyes when explaining his ideas. Let me remind you, this is supposed to be the cold, pragmatic businessman, one of the wealthiest and toughest men in the world. Just months earlier, West Ham passed on Amorim because of the cost, and Liverpool passed because of the style. In those meetings, Ruben didn't budge an inch. He lectured them on his philosophy, insisting that he needed his players to make it work. He basically told them he wasn't going to be flexible or try to fix things with the players they already had. Liverpool took time to think, and John Henry decided it was too risky, a radical departure from Klopp's canons. So FSG chose Arne Slot, and the Dutchman didn't tear anything down. Calmly, with just one transfer, the injury-prone Chiesa, he rode his predecessor foundation straight to the title. That is a shrewd, calculated decision based on a sober assessment of reality, and ignoring reality is exactly what would eventually doom United. So it's mid-November. Amorim takes over a broken team sitting in 13th place. Full of ambition and anticipating a great adventure, the Portuguese coach doesn't fully realize what he has walked into. He has no idea that the pressure will be 10 times heavier than expected and that every promise made to him will turn out to be a lie. The countdown begins. Yet the reality proved far worse than the speculation. We completely underestimated just how stubborn Ruben was, and his total refusal to adapt to the squad. The team was awful on the pitch, and the dressing room was a war zone because nobody accepted their new roles. Defenders were confused in transition, and attacking stars felt like robots, denied the right to improvise. Bruno openly fumed in a deep-line playmaker role, where his creativity went to die, while Rashford, forced into a rigid structure, stopped even pretending to press. Amorim only tightened the screws, publicly criticizing leaders for a lack of passion, which just added fuel to the fire. Sure, they had a Europa League run, but then came the ultimate embarrassment, losing a final to Tottenham, a team that never wins anything. In hindsight, we undervalued Ten Hag's 8th place finish. For the first time since 2014, no Europe at all.
Today, after this disaster season, I want to tell you the good days are coming.
Nevertheless, the club enters pre-season awaiting major changes, especially as Wilcox officially takes the role he has effectively held for 18 months while eliminating rivals. If anyone can claim the season as a victory, it is Jason Wilcox. He forged a tight bond with Amorim and was that buddy who defended him in the press and told him in private, "Hey, don't worry, the board knows it's hard." They spoke daily. Wilcox attends every training session, and we spent hours analyzing matches in his office. You can see the pattern. With every week, Jason was quietly assuming more control. Was it real friendship or just a calculation? Who knows, but that closeness helped diffuse Ruben's anger after the summer window. Because the promised carte blanche didn't materialize even halfway. Yes, United spent heavily on a new attack, signing 3 players who immediately entered the club's top 10 most expensive transfers. The problem? Not a single one was a priority option on Amorim's wish list. And here another character enters the hierarchy of United's power structure. Chris Vival. He had done incredible work at Leipzig and Salzburg, bringing real diamonds into the Red Bull system that generated huge profits. That resume seduced INEOS and Sir Jim specifically. And here we see the same pattern again. Ratcliffe likes an individual, likes their skills and hires them, but how does it all fit into one system? One day Jim talks about the club returning to the very top immediately, the next day he refuses to sign ready-made stars and wants to develop kids instead. These two things simply don't match. How do you plan to close the gap on rivals spending €500 million in one window while you are searching for prospects? But we will return to this in the final chapter. As a temporary consultant, Vival analyzed databases and reformed the analytics department. The scouting team was slashed from 100 people down to 10, with Chris at the helm controlling all data and decision-making. He even played a part in that final summer campaign for Ten Hag. But after Ashworth's dismissal, Chris got a permanent contract and a serious promotion. He became the director of recruitment. Working closely with Wilcox, it was Vival who provided the list of targets based on positions requested by the coaching staff. And it was from his lists that United operated in the summer of 25, essentially abandoning previous agreements with Amorim. They gave him only compromise options, players who were far from the top of his wish list. In reality, he was simply deceived. They forgot all the promises of control they made to lure him from Portugal. Basically, Amorim's future was already dead in the water that summer. It was all over the moment the coach received those dry answers that his candidates didn't fit the club's new course. The only question left was, would Ruben blow up or would he just swallow it? Well, 6 months later we definitely know the answer. Ruben kicked off the season claiming he wanted to stay for 20 years and build a dynasty. It looked like a signal, like he was finally ready to play ball if the club met him halfway. By the way, he tries this exact move again later in the season. But on the pitch, same old problems. The team lacked compactness and looked totally confused by the tactics. The only thing that saved them was the individual skills of the new signings. Without that, it was a disaster show. On top of ignoring his summer wishlist, Wilcox and Vival denied him an athletic number 8 and an experienced center-back, citing an exhausted transfer budget with a promise to fix the defense and midfield in the winter window. By October, the crisis reached its peak. Amorim broke his predecessor unwanted record, delivering the worst start in United's history after 6 games, sitting in the 14th place. The press and fans demanded blood. The situation escalated, and just like with Ten Hag, the club publicly supported the manager, only to later turn those 3 years into just 3 months. Amorim certainly added fuel to the fire, but his frustration was understandable. As the transfer window approached, he realized that those informal chats and tactical sessions with Wilcox throughout his tenure weren't about friendship, support or trust. They were about exerting influence. After the disastrous start, Ruben managed to stabilize the ship, and United even climbed into the top 5. But let's be real, the overall level of the league dropped incredibly this year, with every top team lacking consistency on the long haul. In December, 3 key players jet off to AFCON, and this is where Amorim's endgame begins. With the squad thin and his schedule crazy, Ruben had to swallow his pride and ditch his holy back 3. On Boxing Day against Newcastle, he finally plays a back 4. And miracle of miracles, they grind out a minimal win, thanks to a lucky goal from a rookie. Amorim admits later, the guys can't handle my system physically, I had to change. It was a step forward, another signal. He was essentially telling the bosses, look, I can be flexible, I'm making sacrifice for results. He likely expected this gesture to be appreciated and reciprocated. In the next game against Wolves, he returned to a back 3, played out a dreary draw and then received an invitation to Wilcox's office, a place he visited less and less frequently. Perhaps Ruben held a faint hope that his signal had been received and the board was finally ready to meet him halfway. But oh, how wrong he was. Then came Day X, the morning of January 3rd, the day before the Leeds game, Carrington Wilcox's office. But on this Friday, the tension was thicker than ever. Amorim explained that without Burma and Amat, his attack was critically understaffed, and he demanded Antoine Semenyo. Wilcox shut him down immediately. Vival's computer says no, he's overperforming, bad investment. Ruben started to boil, and then Jason did exactly what he had been gently probing for during all those friendly chats and tactical sessions. He stated that the players were overloaded by tactics and suggested returning to the back four that worked against Newcastle. At this point, Amorim simply snapped. In the ensuing argument, Wilcox put Ruben in his place, emphasizing that he is the actual manager here, while the Portuguese should just stick to coaching. Amorim gave a final answer that effectively ended the meeting. It was the final nail in the coffin regarding whether Amorim would ever get even the illusion of the control he was promised. He had tolerated the situation for 6 months, believing things might improve by the winter window. But when the head of analytics, whose data dictates every major decision, is biased against you and your system, success was impossible from the start. The Leeds game was just a formality. Wilcox had already decided Amorim was done. He just needed the green light from Ratcliffe. You know, the same Ratcliffe who promised to coach 3 more years just 3 months ago. Ruben, clearly charged and on edge, arrives at that press conference after Leeds. And I'm certain that beyond simply blowing off steam, beyond the frustration boiling over, he was trying to bypass Wilcox and send the message straight to the big boss. All season he'd been signaling, I can change if you help me. But this was an all-in bet, and unfortunately it played out in the completely opposite direction.
I came here to be the manager of Manchester United, not to be the coach. That was the deal. And it's going to be like this for 18 months, or when the board decided to change.
INEOS did not appreciate the gesture. A public revolt against the club hierarchy was seen by Ratcliffe as the final argument for dismissal. In the end, Wilcox didn't even have to convince Jim. Amorim did all the dirty work for him. Now the fans and football community are split into 2 radical camps. One side says, look, this guy is statistically the worst manager since World War II. He has no right to demand power when he can't get results or play good football. They think the board just realized they made a mistake and decided to stop wasting money on a dead project. Harsh, but fair enough. But the other side sees Amorim as the victim. You dragged him out of a perfect situation mid-season, promised him power, promised to back his ideas. You told him he'd get time and rebuild. Instead, you set him up to fail. You made him a walking target, and by summer people were already calling him a fraud. And then, right when the real work was supposed to start, you ripped up the agreements and started meddling in his coaching. Pick your side, but the problem is, in either story, INEOS and Sir Jim look terrible. No matter how you spin it, they have completely blown their credibility. 12 managers in 13 years. All these discussions and subsequent appointments are meaningless, because since Fergie left, the club has never had 2 consecutive managers who adhered the same style or played the same football without tearing everything down. Not once in 13 years has a general line been continued. It is always another reboot, always a new start, always a dose of fresh populism. And just when it seemed the club was finally ready to break this vicious cycle by seriously undertaking internal reforms and choosing a systemic coach, United failed miserably again. But this case hits the club much harder because it undermines trust in INEOS and in the very idea that these people can pull United out of the abyss. After all, they seem to lack belief in their own ideas and contradict themselves at every step. These 12 managers, just like the next 12, are pre-condemned figures, men with targets on their backs who merely become parts of United's eternal cycle. As long as there is an eternal struggle for power and control, as long as personal interests rule over competence, and as long as the upper management structure is mired in lies, and not even the best coach in the world can solve United's problems. By the way, do you remember at the very beginning I briefly mentioned INEOS's presence in football and other sports before entering United? I didn't fully expand on the topic then, so as not to scare you too much right away. The fact is, almost everything INEOS touches in the sporting sphere turns into a grand failure. They literally flooded Lausanne with money that should have allowed the club to become the hegemon of Swiss football. But lacking a competent long-term strategy, the club was relegated from the top division twice, and now is just an ordinary mid-table side. Nice is in exactly the same position. Their only achievement under INEOS was a French Cup final. But at least they are setting records shifts for managers, 7 in 6 years. In 2019, INEOS purchased the legendary Team Sky, a dynasty that had been destroying everyone at the Tour de France. And that is exactly where its decline began. Year after year, they lost leading riders, losing the competitive edge to Visma and UAE. The rock bottom was 2025, then their main star, Tom Pidcock, walked out. Formula One. In 2020, INEOS acquired a third of Mercedes, and by some incredible coincidence, the sunset era of that team began right then. By 2024, the main owner was even attempting to buy those shares back. Their automotive project, the INEOS Grenadier SUV, has become a genuine black hole. Production constantly halted due to supply chain issues, sales fell short of expectations, and losses have already exceeded £1 billion. And what about good old Jim's core business, his chemical empire? It too is sitting on a powder keg of debt. The INEOS Group's net debt is estimated in the billions, and amidst falling demands, rising energy costs, and various political obstacles, the holding company finished 2024 with a loss instead of the initially projected profit. So I ask you, are these people who have failed in Switzerland, France, on a cycling track, and even in the auto industry, and who are facing hard times in their main business, really capable of saving and restoring the most difficult to manage football club in the world? Be serious, this new United is certainly trying to act and look like a modern, multi-level organization, but due to the sheer scale of the club, the politics, and the bizarre power structure, where Manchester is perhaps the only organization in the world where a shareholder with just 25% has full control, it is going disastrously wrong. There are simply too many influential people here, and their powers overlap rather than flowing down a hierarchy. As a result, the chain of command is far too long. By the time a decision goes all the way up and comes back down, it's no longer the same decision, because every participant in that chain has their own opinion, their own vision, and their own interest. This leads to total chaos. Promises are made, but reality delivers something else entirely. Ten Hag's extension happened without Berrada and Ashworth's involvement. They admitted in interviews that they had only just arrived. Or take another example. The rift between Ratcliffe and Ashworth occurred partly because Dan repeatedly asked Jim to outsource analytics to an external company unrelated to the people inside the club. He wanted to ensure that the data driving key decisions wasn't being fed upwards to serve someone's personal agenda. But the big boss, with unconcealed irritation, refused that request. But the problem isn't the data, the problem isn't the numbers or the analytics. The problem is the people acting on those numbers. Perhaps this complex management structure is designed specifically for a multi-club model, where all these executives would have more space to operate rather than fighting for power within a single club. However, one must ask, is this model even viable under INEOS, given how poorly they manage their existing sports assets? Believe it or not, there are actually winners in this tragedy. Yes, the villains always win. For the Glazers, this is probably the best time they've ever had. Think about it, 2 years ago they got themselves a perfect human shield. Now Ratcliffe takes all the bullets while they sit back and watch INEOS sweat to boost income just to pay off their debt. I bet they're laughing their heads off in their New York office every time they read about another round of staff cuts. Guys, honestly, I've lost hair making this video. I'm out of anger, out of nerves, out of everything. It's been a huge stress, so please hit that like button and subscribe. I need it! So the Glazers are loving it. They watch these guys work hard to pay their loans, and they are absolutely thrilled about the new training grounds and the stadium plans. Do we realize how much those projects pump up the value of the club? The Glazers still own a huge chunk of shares, and they are just getting richer without doing a thing. And Ratcliffe, I think he finds himself in a situation that can only be described as dystopian. The original purchase agreement included a guarantee that he would invest this 300 million into the club, and those funds evaporated quite quickly. Afterward, he stated that continuing to flood the club with money was not the solution. Jim believes the key to improvement is continuing to cut operational costs and increasing revenue. We've seen his cost-cutting genius already. Britain's richest man saves £1 million a year by cutting staff lunches just to throw nearly 50 million into the furnace over 2 years on hiring and firing managers. Make it make sense. But okay, what about making more money? Here too things are grim. United's revenues have been stagnating for 6 years. After the pandemic, the entire Big Three overtook them, and now even Tottenham is getting closer and closer. Most importantly, Manchester is no longer the king of commerce. The days of old Woodward are gone forever. Today, the United brand has become far more toxic. With the absence of major victories, trophies, and now even truly big players, United is no longer the priority Premier League club for sponsors and partners around the world. Sure, another way to boost income is winning. Getting back into the Champions League brings in a guaranteed £100 million. Plus, it helps you sign top players and managers. But honestly, do you see this United with this unbalanced squad finishing top 4 every single year? They blew it. They missed a golden chance to close the gap this season when every rival was struggling and the league quality dropped off a cliff. Besides, to have stable results, you need stable leadership, you have to back your project, move forward step by step, ignore the noise, and don't change the rules halfway. You need patience, not meddling in the coaching or demanding a yes-man manager. Basically, you need to do what Arsenal did. But at United, with a sporting director who talks like that, forget it, impossible. And the most critical point here is that the arms race initiated by competitors will continue. But today's United, with its billion-pound debt, simply cannot sustain such a race, meaning the gap will not shrink, it will only widen. Fighting against such vast money could be possible through smart management decisions. Football history knows many such cases, but this does not apply to United. Smart and management are two words that simply cannot coexist in the same space when it comes to this club. Okay, there is one last hope for cash. The Wembley of the North stadium they announced in 24. And here we again encounter the rich inner world of Sir Jim clashing with harsh reality. How can an organization with such massive debt even speak of building a facility worth £2 billion? The Glazers won't participate in this project, and the idea of selling it to the state as a regeneration of the North also failed. So what? Take on the full financing himself? He's not a complete madman. Who would invest £2 billion in such a gamble when you aren't even the majority shareholder? It turns out the only real option to realize this project is new loans, only this time at even higher interest rates, as the total debt load makes the club a potentially dangerous borrower that could go bust. And for dessert, here's the biggest result of INEOS's 2 years in charge. United's debt under this new regime, after hiring ticket prices, slashing charity works, firing tons of people and cancelling Christmas parties, didn't just stay the same, it hit an all-time high. But sure, let's go ahead and announce a new £2 billion stadium. Even the Glazers never reached such figures. That is a genuine achievement. But what is next? What is the way out? I repeat, Jim said that pouring his own money into the club doesn't work for him. So refinance? Again? But that is exactly the strategy the Glazers used for 20 years, which is why they haven't paid off even the majority of the loan principals, spending nearly £800 million on interest payments alone. Just think about those numbers. In any case, all these financial solutions will be meaningless until the club defines the one true course it will follow. Because at the very start you say you will sign and develop young players, then you declare an ambition to return to the top as quickly as possible and close the gap on rivals. Then you set a goal to win the league by the club's 150th anniversary. And then come other perturbations, new ideas, new people, new resets. So yeah, anyway, thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate your time. This was actually a big step for me. Before I used an AI trained on my voice, but honestly, I'm just so sick of all of this AI slop. It's everywhere and it feels fake. I realized it's better to just be myself, better to be real. I know my English isn't perfect and it's not my native language, but I'm working hard on my pronunciation and my Eastern Europe accent and it's only going to get better from here. So let me know in the comments how did it sound, and also drop a comment if you have any ideas on how United can actually get out of this mess. Is there even a way out? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!